Before you take your next breath, know this. Somewhere in the ancient dark, a scale is waiting for you. Not a courtroom, not a jury of your peers. A single golden scale held in a hall of absolute silence, presided over by a god with the head of a jackal and eyes that have witnessed every sin ever committed since the first human heart learned how to lie. And on one side of that scale sits a feather. Your heart goes on the other. If you have lived well, you pass through. If you have not, if your heart is bloated with cruelty, with greed, with cowardice, a creature made of nightmares opens its jaws, and you are gone. Not dead, erased. This was not a metaphor to the ancient Egyptians. This was as real as the Nile flooding its banks each year, as certain as the sun rising over the desert. And the God who oversaw that judgment, who guided the dead, who held the scales, who decided the fate of every soul that had ever drawn breath, was Anubis. Long before the pyramids cast their shadows across the sand, before the great temples of Karnak and Luxor rose like prayers frozen in stone, Egypt was a land already ancient in its faith. The Egyptians believed that existence did not end at death. It transformed, passed through a veil into the Duat, the underworld that mirrored the living world in strange and terrifying ways. To navigate that realm safely required guidance, and the gods who governed death were among the most powerful in the entire Egyptian pantheon. Anubis, known in the ancient texts as Ampu or Inpu, was the firstborn son of Osiris, god of life and resurrection, and Nephthys, goddess of night and death. Though some accounts name his mother as Isis, and others whisper he was born of a secret union, all traditions agree on one truth. He came into the world already intimate with darkness. When Osiris was murdered and dismembered by the jealous god Set, it was Anubis who gathered the pieces. It was Anubis who invented embalming, who wrapped the torn body of his father in linen, who performed the first act of mummification the world had ever seen. From that moment, the god of the dead became the guardian of the dead, and his dominion stretched across every tomb, every burial rite, every soul that crossed from the living world into the eternal one. He stands at 6 feet of absolute stillness. The body of a man, lean, dark-skinned, dressed in the white linen of a priest or the black robes of the tomb, but above the shoulders, everything human ends. The head is that of a jackal, long-snouted and sharp-eared, with eyes the color of polished amber that catch the light of the afterlife like 2 coins dropped into oil. His fur is black, not the black of night, but the black of fertile Nile soil, of rebirth, of the earth that swallows seeds and returns them as something living. He smells of natron and cedar oil, of the resins used to preserve the dead. When he moves, there is no sound, not even the whisper of cloth. In one hand he carries the scepter, the symbol of divine authority. In the other, or hanging at his side, the flail of judgment. His ears stand straight, always listening, because the dead speak in frequencies the living cannot hear, and Anubis misses nothing. His powers extend across every boundary between life and death. He can see into the heart, not the physical organ, but the accumulated weight of every choice a soul ever made. He guides the newly dead through the corridors of the Duat, protecting them from the serpents and demons that lurk in those tunnels. He knows the name of every soul that has ever passed through his hall, and in Egypt, to know a name was to hold absolute power over the thing that bore it. His only limitation was this: he could not override the scales. The feather did not lie, and even Anubis could not argue with the feather. The most sacred myth surrounding Anubis is not a battle. It is something more terrifying, a trial. The story comes from the Book of the Dead, that extraordinary collection of spells and instructions buried with the Egyptian dead for thousands of years, a manual for navigating the afterlife written on papyrus and entombed in darkness. A soul arrives in the Hall of Two Truths, the great judgment chamber of the Duat. The dead man's name, in many versions, is simply the deceased, unnamed, universal, because this story belongs to everyone. He stands before 42 divine judges, each presiding over a specific sin. He must recite the negative confession, a declaration of innocence. I have not killed, I have not stolen, I have not spoken lies, I have not caused suffering to the widow. 42 confessions, each one a door that must be unlocked. And then Anubis steps forward. He does not speak first. He simply reaches into the chest of the deceased, not violently, but with the practiced certainty of a priest who has performed this act 10,000 times, and he removes the heart. He places it on the left side of the golden scale. On the right, he places the feather of Mad, the white plume of truth, justice, and cosmic order. The hall goes silent. Even the gods stop breathing. The scale begins to move. Every lie the soul ever told adds weight. Every cruelty. Every moment it chose comfort over compassion, silence over justice. The scale tips. And in the corner of the hall, something stirs. Amit, the devourer. Part lion, part hippopotamus, part crocodile, the three most dangerous predators the Nile ever produced, fused into one creature of absolute finality, crouched beside the scale like a dog waiting for a scrap to fall. Her eyes are fixed on the heart. She has waited an eternity for this moment. The needle trembles. The heart is heavy, but is it too heavy? Anubis watches the scale with the absolute patience of something that has never known urgency, because time means nothing to the god who stands at the end of it. The deceased cannot breathe, cannot speak, cannot bargain. And then the scale steadies. The heart and the feather hang in perfect balance. Amit snarls once and retreats into the dark. Anubis looks at the soul with those amber eyes, and in that look is everything: acknowledgement, release, and the first hint of something almost like mercy. He turns and leads the soul onward to Osiris. The door to paradise opens. But not every heart is light. For those souls whose hearts tip the scale toward darkness, there is no second chance. Anubis steps back. Amit lunges. The heart is consumed in a single, terrible instant, and that soul, that person, that name, that entire accumulation of a human life ceases to exist in any form. Not condemned to a hell. Not punished for eternity. Simply gone, like a flame pinched between two fingers. The Egyptians called this the second death, and they feared it far more than the first. This is why they mummified their dead with such obsessive precision. This is why they placed the Book of the Dead in every tomb, to give the deceased the words they would need when they faced the 42 judges. This is why temples to Anubis rose across Egypt, and why priests wore jackal masks during embalming rituals, embodying the god himself as they wrapped the linen around the dead. Every canopic jar, every carefully preserved organ, every amulet pressed into bandages, all of it was preparation for that single moment in the Hall of Two Truths. A word before this tale completes itself. If you have walked this far into the dark with me, you are the kind of soul who still honors the old stories, and the old stories take notice of that. A new myth rises on this channel every single day. Subscribe and let the next one find you. The myth of Anubis did not stay buried in the sand. It walked forward through centuries, bleeding into every culture that came after Egypt's golden age. The Greeks absorbed him, merging Anubis with their own psychopomp Hermes to create Hermanubis, the guide of souls who appears in Hellenistic art with a jackal's head and a Greek herald staff. The Romans built temples to him on the banks of the Tiber. In modern culture, Anubis has never truly left. He appears in films like The Mummy and Gods of Egypt, in video games, in tattoo parlors across the world where his image is inked onto skin as a symbol of protection, of transition, of the belief that death is not an ending but a doorway. The weighing of the heart has permeated Western ideas of divine judgment, that moment of reckoning where a life is measured not by wealth or power, but by how you treated the people around you. We keep telling his story because we cannot stop asking his question. Not what happens after death, but what does it mean to have lived a life light enough to pass through? 4,000 years later, Anubis is still holding the scale, and somewhere in the back of every human mind, we are all still waiting to see which way it tips. Tonight, when the room goes dark and the world goes quiet, ask yourself, if the jackal god reached into your chest right now, how heavy would your heart be? The scale does not care whether you are ready. A new myth rises on this channel every single day. Subscribe, and the next story will be waiting for you before the dark lifts.